Hey, ninth graders, here to do a extended review of something you learned about through a screencast. I normally do not do this, but these concepts were much harder than what I normally go over in a screencast, and since you're not in person with me, I figured I would put this together to try and do just kind of another review before you try and apply everything that you learned to an activity that you're going to start today. Right, so I am reviewing the robber baron business tactics that were talked about in the screencast. I'm not probably going over all of them, but certainly most of them. Right, so these were the main terms as you see on this screen here. And some of these things, I will say, at least elements of these things still exist today, but where we see a problem with a lot of these things happening is when they end up leading to this guy on the right-hand side, right? So when we look at methods of horizontal integration is only really truly bad when we see the company that is using it end up with a monopoly, okay? And I'm going to talk about some modern versions of this taking place and why it's not really bad because it doesn't result in a monopoly, right? So the couple first things, which really aren't bad, they're just general business terms that we have to realize. We are going to be looking at 4 industrialists that were very, very rich and very, very successful during the Gilded Age. We're going to start that activity probably today, depending on when you're watching this. And understand that all 4 of them were considered entrepreneurs. They were all men that were in business or started a business of some kind at some point. So they are all known as entrepreneurs. We will also be looking at entrepreneurs from today to compare the business tactics that are used by our very, very, very wealthy people from the past and the present. Again, we're comparing a lot in this chapter. Most of those entrepreneurs, in order to become really, really, really rich and end up having what's a small business turn into a company, is they form what is called a corporation, right? So a corporation deals with the stock market. When we think of things like Walmart, that is a corporation. And all that really means is that people can invest in your business. And in return of their investment, so that their willingness to give you money to be able to use to run your business, to expand your business, to hire employees, to use it to fill orders and supplies and do all of that and expand and build factories and do all of that. In return, you're giving them a percentage of the profits that your business owns. Usually you give ownership up if you turn it into a corporation, but usually you're the head, you're still in charge of everything, and you're still going to make a boatload of money, definitely more money than you would if you just kept it as a private business. So that is a corporation. Now, what we saw back then were 2 main things that were done. One of them being horizontal integration. This is where you buy out or you run out all of your competition. And you will see many instances of that today and tomorrow when we look at these businessmen from the past. Very, very cutthroat practices. Buying the little guys out, lowering your prices so low that they can't compete, and because you have so much money, you can really kind of take a hit for a little while until they're run out of business, and then you can jack your prices up, right? So horizontal integration is you're either buying out all your competition so you don't have competition, or you're lowering your price and taking a short-term loss in order to kind of strangulate your competition because everybody's coming to you because you're the cheapest place. Once they're out of the picture, then you can do whatever you want. That's horizontal integration. And again, this is only bad when you run out all of the businesses in your industry and you end up with what is called a monopoly. Again, a monopoly is where a business or a company owns 90% or more of that industry. They control it. Most of the time what we see is they're the only one in that industry. They might have one small competitor, but they're the only one in that industry. And monopolies are illegal today. They were not back then during the Gilded Age. Okay, they are illegal today because they eliminate competition, which actually hurts you and I, the consumer, the people buying the products. Because if there's no competition, they can charge whatever they want, right? So competition is really good, and that's why we make monopolies illegal. Right now, examples of horizontal integration, when you if you're at the school and you look out the window of my classroom, you will see what used to be the Acorn and is now Quick-Fill. Right? Now, Quick-Fill ended up buying up all of the Acorns locally. I think there was like 12 or 13 branches around this area they bought up. So you could look at that as a form of horizontal integration. They have bought out one company entirely, all of their competition locally. But they do not have a monopoly, because there's still tens, probably hundreds of different gas station companies in the United States. And really there's still several in this area. There's still the Pump and Pantry. There's still the Dandy Mart, right? So the Acorn is gone. So they have taken out some of their competition, but not all of their competition. So that's a good example of horizontal integration. Again, back then they did it to take out all of their competition. Today people do it just to gain an advantage, take out one of their competitors so they can gain more consumers. Vertical integration is not as cutthroat, and it's pretty commonly seen today, and that is where a company tries to control the entire production process of whatever they're selling, from the production of it all the way to the retail sales. Right? So there are companies today that do this. One that was just in the news last week that I read about was Tesla. Right? Tesla is mainly known as a car company, car manufacturer, and an article came out how they pretty much control every element of the car making process. They own the factories, they own the warehouses, they are raw producing the materials that are going into that car. And if I'm not mistaken, their CEO, kind of the person who created Tesla, is now in the top 3 wealthiest people in America. So it certainly leads to wealth when you can cut out that middleman and grow your profits. Amazon is another one who uses vertical integration. We see this in a lot of different companies being used, and back then they used it to be able to lower their price so low, because if you cut out the middleman, you can cut your price and still make the same profit as everybody else. But because your price is cheaper, you're going to drive everyone else. Now, one thing we need to pay attention to is Amazon is a big one. Some of these companies that are really running out a lot of their competition, not just a business here and there, but they're running out the majority of their competition. Okay, so something to pay attention to. We're going to come back to it when we look at present day industrialists. But back then it would end up being eventually monopolies would be outlawed, and we would end up seeing what were called trusts. So in order to disguise the monopoly, because a monopoly is one company controls that industry. What you would essentially have is what you learned about with a pool, where you have several companies. I shouldn't say several, like 3 to 4 companies. They kind of team up, and they combine all of their money, all of their assets, all of their supplier, everything. And their goal is to not let anybody else in the industry, and then just split the profits, right? So that is essentially a trust. You put people in charge of the trust, and they kind of manage everything, right? So that is how they would end up going about getting around the monopoly issue, and then eventually the government would step in and outlaw trust. Now, you have trust today, different types of trust, but the trust we're talking about, a money trust, a business trust, these would be illegal and are still illegal to this day. And the reason all of this took place was because the government took a very laissez-faire approach to governing. They let businesses do whatever they wanted to during the Gilded Age. All these things that I'm talking about, things being outlawed, monopolies, trusts, that is not going to happen until the next time period we're going to talk about. That's the Progressive Era. All right. So I hope this review helped. You are going to apply all of these things and look for all of these things like horizontal integration and vertical integration, monopolies and trusts. When you are looking at the captains of industry or robber barons of the past and today, you're going to be looking for, did they buy out competition? Did they drastically cut their prices to drive out competition? Did they control the entire production process? All of that, right? Now, the one thing that I'm leaving out that the screencast talk about that they also did to be considered robber baron was they had horrible working conditions. the dangerous, the harsh, the things that we looked at earlier in the week. That's another element of being a robber baron, so do not forget that. If you guys have any questions or need any help on today's activity, please do not hesitate to ask or message me on Remind.